This is on. Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back to Sacred Space. Thank you for joining me and us in this session. Finally back from Europe and the Athens retreat, which was earlier this month. I don't really have the words to express how unbelievable it was. And thank you, everyone, for your support, both those of you who attended, obviously, and those of you who sent your good wishes, even though you weren't able to attend. Perhaps we'll do one in the future, online or in person. It's just so it was just unbelievable, and my heart is just filled with I don't know, download, inspiration, love, gratitude. so thank you so much. Okay, so let's do this. So I'll say, as I always do, I am honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty, and I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space together today. And the things we'll do together in our time together in sacred space. Number one, we will set our sacred space together, and then we'll have our talk on the overall topic. And the topic for this session is Snow White. So we'll tell the grim story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and in the context of recovering the power of your feminine, healing and recovering the power of your inner feminine, regardless of your external gender, right? We all have an inner feminine and an inner masculine within us. So we'll have a whole conversation around that. We'll have a bit of an exercise that we suggest, and then we'll close our sacred space. Okay. So we'll start by setting sacred space. And to begin the process of setting our sacred space, I will just say that what we would like to do, our intention here, is to create a space together which is devoid of fear, threat, and control. In order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, right? Not from the outside, but from within our own selves, however we happen to define that. It could be a muse you follow, brilliant flashes of insight like you get in the shower, instinct, intuition, however you frame it in your mind, but opening to that higher guidance from within your own self. A safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no feeling of danger or threat, so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I always do, that we all follow, to the best of our ability, the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. Number one, confidentiality. What happens in sacred space stays in sacred space, as everyone in Athens will attest to. Nothing bad happened, but it's just, this tender energy is contained and held in the confidentiality of sacred space. Now, online, the stream is public, the replay is public. So the way we handle confidentiality online is via anonymization. So if you would like to be anonymous, you don't have to be anonymous. You don't have to do anything really. But if you would like to be anonymous, you would come into the Crowdcast stream, go into the edit profile section, and then change your username from whatever it is to Mickey Mouse, Harry Potter, what have you, and then come in and continue chatting and whatever you'd like to do. So that's the first principle. The second is that we try as much as possible to not give anyone else, including ourselves, any feeling of fear, threat, or controlling. In the context of a hostile sort of feeling or intention, obviously, right? But also in the context of a well-meaning, well-intentioned, right? So even if I'm coming in hot to control you and tell you, you should do this, you should read this book, you should do this exercise, right? Which we don't. We suggest it, and you do whatever you want. Even fixing in tough love, right? This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, with the best of intentions. Even that we refrain from. Not because it's bad, but because since it comes from the provenance of control and threat, right? Do this or else you'll be even worse off. We simply don't engage in threat. Not because it's bad, but because in sacred space, there are certain things you can only get done in sacred space. Just like there's certain things you can only get done in the protected space of a bank or in the regulated space of an airport. And in exactly the same way, there are certain things you can only get done in sacred space, opening to download to higher guidance fully and really getting it, regardless of what your reaction will be to it later. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. But at least you get it clearly. And so even if it's well-intentioned, we refrain from fixing, interventions, tough love. We're holding space for each other to be however we find ourselves, right? And often our state of mind and being is itself a form of download and guidance. So however we find ourselves, if we're afraid, if we're anxious, we hold space for you to be afraid and anxious. If you're happy and relaxed, we hold space for you to be happy and relaxed. If you're afraid and anxious and trying to fix yourself to not be afraid and anxious and threatening yourself, I better stop. I better fight through my fear and break through my anxiety and limiting beliefs, or else we hold space for you to do that. We hold space for you to do that. Because for me, one of the things that became even more abundantly clear to me in a very embodied way in the week we spent all together in Athens is that the key ingredient for healing, for bliss, for manifesting what you desire in life, the key ingredient is not even insight or wisdom. It's safety. It's safety. So I can give you all the wisdom in the world, but if I do this, even if you follow it, right? It's like, what is the point of love if it's forced, right? At the point of a gun. And so, so anyway, so that's the second principle. I should get through this. It's going to take too long. The third principle is no commerce, right? So nothing may be sold in sacred space. I can't sell you anything. Gary can't sell you anything. Please refrain from pitching things to each other in the chat. We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. And that covers recommendations and suggestions as well. So even if I recommend a book and I say this book is the be all end all, I don't know the author, I'm not getting any compensation. Even that we refrain from. It's not about whether I'm getting financial compensation. It's more about the threat. And all good marketing is threat, right? Do this or else you won't look beautiful, you won't lose weight, you won't be smart enough, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't do that. No commerce, no recommendations. And then the fourth principle, a corollary to the first two, is that there is also, finally, no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure, there's no fear, threat, or control to actually do anything, right? Stay for the whole thing, don't stay for the whole thing. Watch the replay, don't watch the replay. Send this to all your friends, send it to no friends. Keep it for yourself. Chat, don't chat. Ask questions, don't ask questions. There's no pressure to do anything. Again, the nourishment comes from even following these four principles. There's no or else. It's just like try your best. Just try your best only if you want. Okay. And if we all do it, we will kind of get this kind of thing going where we're above the water and really sort of cruising. Because again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention only if you want. From what you are, not from what you do or provide. Okay. And all of us together in a group will tend to amplify that effect. So this is what I propose. And if you're not okay with that, totally cool. There's no fear, threat, and control to be okay with that. But this is the space we're about to cross the threshold over into. So if this is not the plane you want to be on, sacred space is not the destination, now would be the time to deplane. And we'll catch up with you later. We'll still be friends. I'll still email you in profane space, right? We'll still hang out. No worries at all. But for now, we're just going to pause for half a moment to give everyone a chance to take a breath, make their sovereign decision on whether they would like to continue. And I'll give you all a moment to dial that in. Okay. All right. Good job. And so for the rest of us now, we will now move forward together in our shared space. And as we cross the threshold now into our shared sacred space, I will just remind everyone, including myself, that we would like here in this space, as much as possible, to maintain the 4 principles of sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no fixing, no tough love, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome to our sacred space. Welcome back. It's been a month plus here now because of all the traveling and everything. It's funny, even though I've gotten a ton of sacred space in my travels, I still miss this form of sacred space. I think it has something to do with my being at home in my sort of office world, where a lot of my energy resides, and also all of you, right? Those of you who I see mainly online, I haven't seen in over a month, and not to be too corny about it, but I've missed you. So here we are, and so our topic session topic for this session will be Snow White and Recovering the Feminine. And so this is a story. This is the story that Gary selected for this session, and it really led us to reflect on the dynamics and the physics of recovering the inner feminine, regardless of your external gender, by the true power of her voice and vision through a cycle of transformations that's kind of rooted and grounded in embodiment, right? So, so I think I'm going to ask Gary to come up on screen and tell us about the story. Tell us about how she came to select this story, and take us through it. So, Gary, if you are there.
Hi, Artie.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
All perfect. It's good to see you again. Thank you for being back with us.
Thank you. Like you said, it feels like a long time since we did the last Sacred Space.
A long time.
I know. So, yeah, it's good to be back. It's fun to be back. Right. So Snow White. That's a story.
When you brought it up, I was like, I already told the story like 10 years ago. It's in the Mythic Healing, whatever. And I was like, all right, it's probably time for a refresh.
And I had forgotten. Like I've done that series so many times, but I've still forgotten. I can't remember a thing about that story.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why kind of the muse brought it and said, it's time we did this again. And in the context of everything that we've been talking about in Sacred Space sessions, the progression of all the symbols that have come up for us and all the metaphors that we've explored, I think it's probably just time that we did this. And you know that I have this bias, my own bias, to go and explore all these obscure hidden stories from all sorts of traditions that I've never heard about. And it's
I know the bias well.
It's really it's just fun, right? It's fun to find stories that I've never heard of, but stories that have familiar symbols that I can recognize from the very popular folktale or fairy tale traditions. So I've always been biased towards getting new stories. So every time I have this feeling that maybe we should just do Cinderella, maybe we should just do Snow White.
Right, or a Greek story, right?
Or a Greek story.
Yeah.
And I feel like, well, there's always already like tons of Disney movies on that. And we've already, and there are even in mythopoetic discussions, Jungian scholars talking about these stories. There's a lot that is said about these stories. So I'm like, let's go do something different. Let's go do something new. But this time it just came up. Snow White just came up so strong. I'll talk about it after I've narrated the story.
Okay.
go into
Okay.
detail on how
Okay.
it actually came up for me, and it just sat with me for a month. And then I said, okay, I think it is really time to do this. So that's
Good. I'm
what.
glad you did it. I'm
Yeah,
glad you did it. Good job.
yeah. So should I go with the story then?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the story, as you know, first appeared in writing, at least, with the Grimm's Brothers fairy tale collection. All right, and it was prevalent in the popular children's fairy tale, collection or story pantheon of Europe, and grandmothers would tell their grandchildren, and it was probably quite popular when the Grimm's brothers collected it. But since then, it's just shot up in popularity. Everyone knows Snow White. The reference is just everywhere, right? So in German, it's called Little Snow White. In English, it's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So it's a really popular story. So the way this goes, and I'm going to read this anyway because just the act of reading a story, even when you know the story, you've heard it 1,000 times, and this happens to me all the time. Stories from my childhood. In fact, the more familiar I am with it, when I hear it again, the more powerful it feels, the more it speaks to me.
I have one thing to say about that.
Yeah.
Which is when you're in a story, when someone's telling you a story, you are in many ways in sacred space. And the thing that kind of quickly opens the sacred space is what is at the beginning of every fairy story, which is some form of the phrase "once upon a time." Once upon a time.
Yeah.
And we see this in modern, Star Wars. Every Star Wars begins with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
Which instantly sets the container of basically sacred space, which is we are leaving our time now.
Yeah.
We are leaving our time now. The passing moment now of mortgages and report cards and all this other stuff, that matters, right? I mean, if I don't pay my parking meter, I am going to get a ticket. I don't want to get a ticket. There's fear, threat, and control there. It's not necessarily bad. But that is profane space. And when we say once upon a time, we basically are leaving our current passing moment into the realm of the eternal moment. Right. So when we see Snow White or Luke Skywalker or whoever go through their adventures, it doesn't affect me and my revenue for the year, right, or my relationship with my kids or family or whatever. But watching the machinations in the archetypal realm downloads certain wisdom to me. And there's a school of thought that says that the downloading, in some sense, can go both ways as well. Kind of a difference between channeling and portaling, which is just becoming more clear to me as well, but we won't really get into that yet. So this thing, so the beauty of telling a fairy story or a dream or anything like this within sacred space is that right now we are already in sacred space. We've already done our fancy version of Once Upon a Time, where I've set sacred space. We've crossed the threshold into our sacred space. We're in this realm, hopefully, as devoid as much as possible for the next hour or so of fear, threat, and control. And then within the container of sacred space, you then tell a fairy story, which then is another container in the container of sacred space. So it's like sacred space squared. It's like a dream within a dream. So it takes us into an even more concentrated version, which is why I love that you actually tell the story every time. It's like, oh, the Seven Dwarves. Actually telling the story as you bring us into it takes us into an even deeper level of the sacred. And it does something to us energetically. It certainly does something to me. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, okay, so here goes. Once upon a time, right, in midwinter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven, a queen sat sewing at her window. And this window had a frame of black ebony wood. And as she sewed, she looked up at the snow and she got distracted. So she pricked her finger with her needle. And 3 drops of blood fell into the snow. The red on the white looked so beautiful that she thought to herself, if only I had a child, as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in this frame. And soon afterward, she had a little daughter who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. And therefore, they called her Little Snow White. And as soon as the child was born, the queen died. And so a year later, the king took himself another wife, and she was a beautiful woman, but very proud and arrogant. And she couldn't stand it if anyone could be better than her in beauty. And she had a magic mirror. So every morning she stood before the mirror and she looked at herself. We would just look at ourselves in the mirror and see what's reflected back. But this is a magic mirror. So she would say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? And so to this question, the mirror would answer, you, my queen, are fairest of all. And then, she was satisfied with the answer because she also knew that the mirror spoke the truth always. And then Snow White grew up. And as she grew up, she became ever more beautiful. And when she was about, 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the light of day and even more beautiful than the queen herself. And so one day the queen just randomly asked the mirror again, mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? And the mirror answered back, you, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you. And so the queen took fright and she turned yellow and green with envy. And from that hour on, her heart knew no rest. She just turned this over and over in her mind, and she had so much hatred for the girl. And every day that hatred just grew more and more. And, with all that envy and pride and the hate and all of this, she just had no peace, day or night. And so she finally summoned a huntsman. And she said to him, take Snow White out into the woods. I never want to see her again. Right? Kill her. And as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me. Right? So this is how great the hatred is. I mean, she just doesn't want to exile her in the woods. She wants to kill her, and she wants proof that she's well and truly dead. And so the huntsman obeyed. He took Snow White into the woods. He took out his hunting knife. He was about to stab it into her innocent heart. And, that's when Snow White broke down and she cried and said, oh, dear huntsman, please let me live. I will run into the wild woods and I'll never come back. So I'll get out of your way, right? And because she was so beautiful, the huntsman took pity on her and said, oh, run away, you poor child. But really, he thought, you'll get killed by the wild animals anyway. You're not going to survive this forest for long. So he just didn't want to be the one to kill her. And after she fled, there was a young boar that came running, and he killed it and cut out its lung and liver, and it took them back as proof to the queen. And the wicked woman didn't stop there. She made the cook, boil these lungs and liver with salt, and she actually ate them, thinking she was eating Snow White's lungs and liver. And back in the forest, the poor girl was now all alone, and she was so afraid. She looked at all the trees in the forest and she didn't know what to do. So she began to run. She ran over stones, she ran over thorns, she came across wild animals that jumped at her, but they didn't do her any harm. They just let her go. She kept running. She ran as fast as her feet could carry her, until she came to a little house. Right? And this house, like deep in the forest, deep in the woods. And inside this house, everything was just so neat and tidy and clean and small. And there was this little table with a white tablecloth, 7 little plates. Each plate had a spoon, knives and forks, and 7 mugs. And across the table against the wall, there were 7 little beds, all standing in a row, covered with perfect snow white sheets. And she was so hungry and thirsty by now. She'd come running a long way. She ate a few vegetables. She took a little bread from each little plate. She drank from each mug, like a drop of wine from each mug. And afterwards, she was so tired, she lay down on the bed. None of them felt right. She went to each bed, tried them, and one was too long, the other too short, until she finally went to the 7th bed, and that just felt right. And she fell asleep. And so after dark, the masters of the house came back home, and they were 7 dwarfs who actually dug and mined for ore in the mountains. And so they came back home after a day's hard work. They lit their 7 candles. And as soon as there was light, they could tell that things were not in the same order as they had left it. So the first one said, "Who's been sitting in my chair?" Right? And the second one went, "Who's been eating from my plate?" The third one went, "Who's been eating my bread? Who's been eating my vegetables? Who's been using my fork? Who's cut with my knife? Who's been drinking from my mug?" And so on. And then one saw a little imprint in his bed. So he realized someone had stepped on his bed. And everyone realized their beds had the same kind of imprint. And finally, the 7th one found Snow White lying in his bed. And he cried out. They all came running. I think they were kind of excited and amazed by this thing. They got their 7 candles. They shone the light on Snow White and said, "Oh, good heaven, this girl, this child is so beautiful." And they were very excited and happy, but they didn't want to wake her up. So they let her continue to sleep in the bed. And the 7th dwarf had to kind of take turns, 1 hour in each bed, trying to kind of accommodate with others. And so finally the night was done, right? And Snow White woke up. And at first, when she saw the 7 dwarfs, she was frightened, right? And she looked at them, and they were sweet and they were friendly, and said, "What's your name? How did you find your way to our house?" And all these questions they had. So she told them that her name is Snow White, and that her stepmother had tried to kill her, and how the huntsman spared her life, and how she had run all day to finally find their house. And the dwarfs then said, "Well, if you will keep house for us, that is, if you cook and you make beds and you wash and you knit, you do all of these things, you keep everything clean and orderly, you can stay with us, and you shall have everything that you want." Right? And so Snow White was happy, and she said, "Oh, yes, 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 with all my heart, I would love to do that." And so she kept house for them. Every morning they went into the mountains looking for ore and gold. And in the evening, when they came back home, they had hot meals ready, and they had the house done, very neat and everything. And the good dwarfs told her, they warned her, saying, "Be careful about your stepmother. Soon enough, she will find out that you're alive, and she will know you're here. So don't let anyone in while we're away." Right? So now the queen, she had believed that Snow White was dead, right? and she believed that she was now the first and the most beautiful woman of all. So she wanted to test this out. She stepped before the mirror and asked the same question. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in the land is fairest of all? And it answered, you, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White, beyond the mountains with the seven dwarfs, is still 1,000 times fairer than you. So this startled the queen, right? And she knew the mirror doesn't lie. She realized the huntsman had deceived her. Snow White was still alive. She was beyond the mountains. She was with the seven dwarfs. She thought and thought how she might kill her, so that she could finally be able to rest. If a cruel heart like hers could rest, she wanted peace, right? So she thought of something, and she made up her face. She disguised herself as an old peddler woman, and in this disguise, she went to the house of the seven dwarfs. And she knocked on the door, and she called out, beautiful wares for sale, right? And she had bodice laces in all colors. She took them out. They were all colorful silk. They were lovely to look at, and she kind of addressed Snow White, who was in the cottage. Would you like this one? And Snow White thought, well, she's just an honest woman who's trying to sell her wares, so maybe I can let her in. And she opened the door and she bought the pretty lace, right? And the old woman said, oh, you child, how beautiful you look. So let me lace you up properly. So she took the lace, and, unsuspecting Snow White, she let her do this. She tied up the lace and then suddenly pulled so quickly and so hard that Snow White couldn't breathe. And then the old woman said, you used to be the most beautiful one. And she hurried away. And so the evening came and the seven dwarfs came home. They looked at Snow White lying on the ground. They were terrified. She looked like she was dead. So they lifted her up, and seeing how tightly laced she was, they cut the lace in two. And then, so as soon as the lace was cut, she began to breathe. And the queen, the wicked queen, went back home. She went to the mirror, asked the same question, mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? And the mirror said the same thing again. You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White, beyond the mountains with the seven dwarfs, is still 1,000 times fairer than you. And so again, when she heard that, she just couldn't take it. She knew somehow Snow White had come back to life, right? So this time she said, I will think of something that will destroy you. And so with the art of witchcraft, which she knew well, she made a poisoned comb. And she disguised herself, taking the form of an old woman, selling wares, the usual thing. But this time Snow White looked out of her window and said, go on your way. I'm not allowed to let anyone in. The old woman said, but you might take a look, right? And she held out this poisoned comb and held it out. She said, this is just so pretty. You don't have to let me in. You can just take a look. And this girl liked it so much that she let herself be deceived, and she opened the door. And as soon as she agreed on buying it, the old woman said, okay, so now let me comb your hair properly. And she had barely stuck the comb into Snow White's hair. The poison took effect, and the girl fell down. Unfortunately, it was just almost evening, right? And this wicked woman hurried out, thinking, okay, Snow White's finished. And the seven dwarfs came home, and they saw Snow White lying on the ground again, like she was dead. And they immediately knew it must be her stepmother. So they examined her to see what was wrong, and they found the poisoned comb in her hair. And they barely pulled it out when Snow White just, came up, and she came back to life. And so once again, they warned her. They told her to be on guard, not to open the door for anyone. And the next day they left for work. And so back at home, the queen went to the mirror, asked the same question, mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? And the mirror answered back the same thing yet again. You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is still 1,000 times fairer than you. And so when the queen heard this, she shook with anger and she said, Snow White shall die if it costs me my life. And so she went into her most secret room where no one else was allowed, and she made a poisoned apple. And from the outside, it was just beautiful, white, with red on the outside, and anyone who saw it would want it. And anyone who might eat a little piece of it would die, right? So then she again went in disguise, like a peasant woman. She went across the mountains. She went to the cottage, knocked on the door. Snow White stuck her head out and she said, I'm not allowed to let anyone in. The dwarfs have told me not to. And the peasant woman said, that's all right with me. I'm just, getting rid of my apples and I can give you one of them. And Snow White said, no, I can't accept anything. And the old woman kind of, joked about this, like mocked at her and said, are you afraid of poison? Look, I'll cut this apple in two. You eat the red half and I'll eat the white half. So this apple had been so artfully made that only the red half was poisoned. And Snow White looked at it and she longed for this beautiful apple. And when she saw that, the peasant woman was eating part of it, and, she thought, well, there couldn't be any harm. She stuck her hand out, took the poison half, and had barely bitten it. And, she fell to the ground, dead. And the queen then, laughed loudly and said, white as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. Well, this time, the dwarfs cannot awaken you. And she went back home, went to the mirror, asked the same question, mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? And it finally answered, you, my queen, are fairest of all. And that's finally when her envious heart was at rest as best as it can be. But so when the dwarfs came home, they found her lying on the ground. She wasn't breathing. She was dead. They lifted her up. They looked for whatever poisonous thing they could find. They loosened up her laces. They combed her hair. They washed her with water and wine. Nothing helped. This dear child was truly dead. So all 7 dwarfs sat next to her. They mourned for her. They cried for 3 days. And they were going to bury her. But because she still looked so fresh as a living person, she still had her beautiful red cheeks, they didn't have the heart to bury her in the black earth. And so they made a transparent glass coffin so she could be seen from any side. They laid her inside, and with golden letters, they wrote on it her name and that she was a princess. And then they put the coffin outside on a mountain. And one of them always stayed with it and watched over her. And so the animals came. The animals mourned for her. The first was an owl, then a raven, and then a dove. And Snow White just lay there in a coffin, for a long, long time. She didn't decay. She just looked like she was asleep. And then it came to pass that a prince entered these woods. And he happened onto, the dwarf's house, where he sought shelter for the night. And he saw the coffin, on the mountain with beautiful Snow White in it. He read what was written on it with golden letters. And then, he just couldn't part with it. He said to the dwarfs, let me have the coffin. I'll give you anything you want for it. And the dwarf said, we will not sell it for all the gold in the world. And so he said, okay, give it to me, as your king to be, right? I can't live without being able to see Snow White. I will honor and respect her as my most cherished one. And as he said this, the good dwarfs, they felt pity for him, and they gave him the coffin. And the prince had his servants carry it away on their shoulders. And it just happened, totally by accident. And one of them stumbled, and it dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat that she had bitten off. And as soon as that happened, she opened her eyes, lifted the lid from the coffin, and she sat up, and she was alive. Right? And she cried out. She looked around and said, "Good heavens, where am I?" And the prince was just so happy. He said, "You are with me." And he told her what happened. And he said, "I love you more than anything else in the world. I want you to come with me to my father's castle, and you shall become my wife." And Snow White loved him, and she went with him. And their wedding was planned with great splendor, and everyone's invited. And the Snow White's stepmother was also invited to the feast. And so she put on her beautiful clothes, and she went to the mirror and asked the usual question, which is, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but the young queen is 1,000 times fairer than you." And with this, the wicked queen, just let out a curse. She became so frightened, she didn't know what to do. And at first she thought she wouldn't want to go to the wedding, but she found no peace. So she had to go and see the young queen for herself. And when she arrived there, she saw Snow White. And she could just stand there without moving. She didn't know what to do. And then they put a pair of iron shoes into burning coals, and they brought it forward with tongs, placed it before her, and she was forced to step into these red-hot shoes and dance till she fell down dead. So that's the story. Artie, would you like to join me? Come on. Hi.
Hello.
Right. That's
powerful. Every time I hear it, it's powerful. Thank you for reading that story again.
Thank you.
So I'll just ask my usual question to start, which is, where do you enter into that story?
Right. So right in the middle of the story where Snow White is in the cabin in the woods, right? That's where. So this is how it came about, right? And this is the reason why I picked the story, is that we did the online retreat this summer, right? And between the weeks where you would have these sessions before the retreat, the weekends where I would be doing check-in sessions and hold space for any updates and insights that came up or questions that came up. In one of these sessions, I asked, and like how I ask every advisee in the session, where they were with their lost board members, they were trying to recover, right? Like we use this term, which is the exiled part of you that you suppress, knowing or not knowing, and you try to recover them and reconcile with them. And I was getting this update and what was going on. So one of the advisees in the session, she shared this update, and in the middle of it, she was quite happy because she had done all these exercises and interviews and everything. She said her lost board member was very happy right now because she was in this cabin in the woods, playing with the dwarves, like Snow White, she said. and she's just very happy doing that. She's just quite content. And this was just, fascinating because this metaphor just came out of nowhere. And in the middle of the session, it was just there. And then she expanded on it. And she said, she just noticed how the dwarves are holding space for this lost board member. And, playing with her like they were children, when technically they were not, right? The dwarves weren't children. but they were, in a sense, she said. And, so they were just happy. And my response to that, generally, like we do in the space holding sessions, is, this is all fantastic. We hold space for this phase of her lost board member being like Snow White. We hold space for her choosing to rest in the forest, in the cabin in the woods. And she's happy. That's all that matters, right? And we hold space for it. We are very happy. And if she never comes out to claim her birthright as the queen, right? It's okay. We will just hold space for whatever she chooses. If she chooses to come out and become queen one day, that's great. We'll hold space for that. If she doesn't, that's okay too. But, just like how the dwarves are technically not children, but, they are like children right now. She is like a child. She's a girl. She's technically not a child either. She's a princess in exile. And if we just extrapolate this story right now, this metaphor that we have, we can predict that there will be one day when she will become queen.
Yes.
Right. So she will become queen. And this advisory.
And yet you don't have to.
How do you?
It's not a. Yeah.
You don't have to. It's not a should, but it's like it just will come up. And this advisor was like, how do you say that? How do you say she's going to be queen? I said,
how do you know that? Right.
Well, you said Snow White. I'm just going along with it, right?
Right.
Because Snow White just will become queen one day, right? That's just how this story pans out. But we don't know if that will ever happen. If for the rest of your life you want to stay as this, this girl in the woods, cabin in the woods, that's okay.
That's okay.
It's not a pressure. It's not a thing. But so when I said this, right, this whole discussion happened. It was beautiful, and it was just so powerful for me, because as I was saying this, it nourished me. Like I felt healed. I felt this very powerful energy, like that just felt like, okay, I just needed to hear this. I needed to say this, and just so powerful. It stayed with me almost like a month, because every single day I was thinking about what she said, that this just being in the woods with the dwarves is such a happy place. Stay in the cabin in the woods for the rest of your life. It's just a happy place that you can just be okay with, in this archetype. So that was very powerful for me. Then that's when I realized, I think it's time we did a classic fairy tale.
When you want to do it. You're like, I'm the editor. I decide.
Yeah. So I think the larger collective kind of needs to hear this. I don't know how much it'll speak to everybody, but I think it's very powerful. There's a reason why this story is so popular, whether we know it or not. I think there's a reason for it. Yeah.
But even for us, I mean, in the retreat groups, in the advising groups, and then here in the Live Sacred Space community, right? On Instagram, I mean, just all these different networks we touch. It can be said, in a matter of speaking, that we are all on kind of a journey together, right? So when you have this interaction with this advisee, you amplify it with her, which is beautiful of you to do, right? So if it was me, I'll be like, oh yeah, you have access to the Snow White story, just go look it up, right? But you sit with her and bring it out, like again for you, but for her, it's the first time. And then this spills out into the larger community, into, everything we're doing. And everyone on Live Sacred Space gets to hear it as well. And I think it's just beautiful. And also, I think it's a very important example of how archetypes work in our lives, right? At the individual level, but then also at the group and community level. So one way of thinking about this is, so when we talk about archetypal manifestation, there's just a big topic in Greece and in the online intensive we'll probably have another round November to January. We're in the middle of figuring that out, tweaking the framework and the format. My focus right now is trying to get things to be less synchronous and live, so we don't have to deal with like all the time zone and scheduling issues, and also to fix things in a way where each person can get more like Artie dream time, which ended up being so powerful in Athens. Every morning we would like read dreams at breakfast, right? So, and so a key question during Greece was, what is the archetype we are living in right now?
Yeah.
Which I thought was going to be just this throwaway questions like, well, the archetype I'm in right now is blah, 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 blah. And I was just like not even fully catching the ball and running to the next thing, which was, what is the archetype you would like to move toward in your life? And everyone was not stuck, but everyone was just like, I don't even know what archetype I'm in right now. And I thought it was a throwaway, easy question. And like, it taught me so much about, it's not that anyone was deficient. It was just like, I realized how the mind works and what a state like not just normal, but a very advanced person, these advisees are in. And I'm like, okay, I need to adjust how I teach this so that it actually, takes. And so here's a great example of one way you get a clue dropped on you of what your current archetype is right now, which was, it may come up in a dream, it may come up in a conversation with someone like Gowrie, right? But one way of seeing into your current archetype is that, it will just, a hint will just drop in a dream, in a reference, in a conversation. And in this case, it wasn't you suggesting, oh, this sounds like Snow White. It was her.
Yeah.
Right. Randomly out of nowhere saying cabin in the woods with the dwarves. I don't think she even said Snow White in your original telling. So it's like cabin in the woods with dwarves. Like it's not even a multiple choice. There's only one option. Right. Even in our profane world, everything's tech, everything's like whatever. These archetypes are like alive and well. It's like hiding in plain sight. So when I say cabin in the woods with the dwarves, it's like you ask any like Joe on the street, they'll be like, well, obviously Snow White. What the hell?
Yeah.
Right. So it's very precise. It seems random. It is random in a way, in the sense that it's not predictable and it's not controllable by your profane controlling mind.
Yeah.
But once it comes through, it is like this threaded needle right through the minefield, and it zings you. Right? Cabin in the woods with the doors, Snow White. So there is no other story that matches that archetypal shard, right? Puzzle piece in the common consciousness. So this is how we identify the archetype. Cabin in the woods with the dwarves is like you find this big, long tree trunk, leathery thing that's like a ginormous snake, but it's not a snake. And you realize there's like nostrils at the end of it. You're like, wait a minute, this is an elephant's trunk. And then you realize the entire rest of the archetype is elephantine. Right? So then before you even pull the rest of the elephant through the veil from the realm of the archetype into the visible world, you already know what's coming. It's like, what kind of ears? Is it a male, female? Does it have tusks or not? Details, right? You know it's an elephant. It's not a giraffe. It's not a car. It's not an airplane. It's an elephant.
Yeah.
But so all the things we know about elephants, it's a symbol of the royal. Elephants have incredibly good memory. It's a matriarchy. It's very family oriented, right? It's being hunted to extinction in our profane world for commercial value, not for its own sort of, we take the elephant from the elephant, bushmeat and tusks, right? Not the lesson of the beauty of matriarchy in family systems, right? We're taking the wrong thing. Just like with the prince, he came and he said, "How much do you want for the coffin? I'll buy it." And they're like, "No. This is not a mercantilistic transaction, And then he realizes and he switched into the sacred and he says, well, just give it to me. Right? This is an extraordinary moment.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't say, well, here's my gun, right? Give it up. Right? It's like, well, if you won't sell it to me in the profane, then give it to me in the sacred, and I will devote my life to this feminine, even inert as she is. Right? And they're like, okay. From the profane, it's like, wait, you wouldn't sell it for all the gold in the world, and now you're giving it away for free? It's like, it's not for free. In the sacred, the physics are different. And they're, if anything, even more compelling than when you're in the profane. So anyway, from a point of view of archetypal manifestation, once you have it's like Wordle, right? That word game that's very popular now.
Yeah.
Once you know like the first two letters and you're like, I think I know what the entire word is. Anything you do after that seems like magic to a bystander. Like, how did you predict the word? You just pull that out of thin air. It's like, it's an elephant because you're experiencing the trunk. The bystander doesn't see the trunk, doesn't see anything. And you start predicting ears and a large mass and a long tail, right? And a matriarchal, pattern. And everyone's like, what are you doing? Are you a prophet or you're whatever? It's like, no, it's just the archetype. Right? So here you found a cabin in the woods with dwarves. The whole thing must be Snow White. So there's something about the Snow White archetype. At the very least, cabin in the woods with the dwarves, the middle part of Snow White, if not the entire thing. We'll see.
Yeah.
That is indicative of the archetype you are living now in your life.
Yeah.
And if you tell it to someone like a Gary, she'll be like, that's Snow White. Let's look at the whole archetype then. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on? And you're like, the next cycle is these 3 trials. The transformation of the masculine from dwarves to prince, and the ascension into queenhood. That is not what you should do. That is what, if you remain in this archetype, will continue. That's the rest of the elephant that's coming down the line.
Yeah.
Only if you want. Yeah. Right? So it's not, this is what you must do. It's like, this is what is coming. Do you like it or not? And that's why we ask the question, what is the current archetype? And then the question after that is, are you okay with that? If you're okay with it, like everything I say, if you're okay with it, carry on, no action needed. If you're not okay with it, it's like, okay, but this is what is coming with the DoorDash Uber Eats order, the driver is on the way. If you would like to make a change to what you're about to receive, let's make some changes.
Yeah.
So I love this. And so, a properly skilled advisor like a Gary will be like, okay, here's the archetype. And the advisor will be like, what? And the advisor will be like, okay, let's go into Snow White, blow it out, and look at all the details and physics of the archetype. And now, of course, it's not just any advisor, it's Gary, right? Gary's bringing it to me. Now we're doing it in public, in live sacred space. So we won't name the advisee. We'll just do Snow White in general. But, to the advisee, if you're listening, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's beautiful for Gary too. It's beautiful for me too. I've always loved this story.
Yeah. So the fascinating thing for me while doing archetypes, like we've been exploring archetypes for a while now, is how we have generic archetypes, right? We have the wise woman archetype. We have the trickster archetype. We've done all of these things. We've got, even within the feminine, we have the motherhood, we have the queendom, we have all of these archetypes, in a very generic sense. They do have features, very specific features, but it's still under the larger general kind of features that we identify with. But then you go into fairy tales, you go into myths, and then these archetypes start becoming very specific. Like Snow White is a very specific archetype with very specific features, right? Cinderella is a very specific archetype.
Completely different, right?
Yeah, completely. They are all inner feminine, but the archetypal journey that they go through is extremely specific in its details and its features. So that's what's fascinating as we go exploring this. Like there are this just thousands and thousands of archetypes, all of them defined by very specific things. So so the curious thing is, we know Cinderella had the same kind of stepmother treatment and all of those things that we discuss in a mythic healing series. Snow White starts off with a very similar thing, stepmotherly treatment, and the themes are same, but the trials are different. The way she then ascends to becoming a queen is the path is different. So there's a very specific journey she goes through. So what is the Snow White archetype then? And I think before you get into that, I'll just make the first the principles of mythic reading for people who are here for the first time, or back after a long time. Just to remind you that when we read myths, all characters are within us. They're all aspects of either the inner masculine or the inner feminine, manifesting in different ways. So we read every single symbol, even the inanimate ones, like the comb, like the apple, the forest, the woods, the cabin. Everything is a reflection of something within us, within our inner world. So how they interact with each other is what tells us about what's happening inside, in the inner world. So that's how it is. So what is the Snow White archetype then? What does it signify?
Okay, yeah. So before I get into Snow White, there is this one question that was posted. It was very moving. I'll just read it very quickly. And it's posted by a woman, and she's saying, I assume, really struggling with how women are portrayed at the moment in society and the violence that leads people to treat us with. It is incredibly difficult to hold to our inner dignity when so much of capitalism and patriarchy is stripping us of respect, treating us as only valuable for sex. How can we demand more humanity from ourselves and men at the moment? So thank you for this. This is it's an enormous question. And I won't pretend to be able to just answer it, right? But I did want to acknowledge it and bow my head to it and give deference to it. And just say that this suppression of women, the degradation of women, is a reflection of the degradation and suppression of the feminine within us as humans, right? So as regardless of my gender, I am taught through culture, through patriarchy, to suppress the feminine within me. So even as a guy, I'm supposed to not sit like a girl, talk like a girl, cry like a girl, or throw a ball like a girl, right? So even if there are no women, I am on guard against being feminine, even in myself as a human. And this reflects out in the outer world. And the other thing is, you say something about at this moment, how we're being mistreated. It's like this has been going on for a couple of millennia, at least. Right? If anything, I could argue historically, it's like it's better than it has been in several thousand years. And I think that there are all kinds of things you can say on the political, social justice sort of side of things. But for me, and the angle sort of I have basically devoted my life to, right, is how we recover the feminine and the power of the sacred and being in the sacred, which is hand in glove with the feminine, recovering the feminine. Is to recover the exiled feminine within our own selves. Right? That's not the only thing to be done. There's a bazillion other things to be done in the outer world as well. In terms of politics, law, everything, right? Culture. But for me, in my area of speciality, right, I focus on the inner world, and there is a selfish benefit for each one of us to recover more and more the feminine within us, to recover more and more the sacred within us. For these purposes, sacred and the feminine are basically interchangeable for these purposes. As we do that more and more, not because we should, but because it feels good, right? Because it heals us, because it makes us literally become more whole in our life, in our vision, in our fulfilling the meaning and purpose of each of our lives, however we discover that to be. The outer then reflects the inner, right? The outer then reflects the inner. And the world around you, this is a longer conversation that I've covered in countless other LSS sessions. So for me, I see this, I'm like, this has been going on for thousands of years. And instead of saying, we can't do anything about it, it's like I look at my own bliss and what I naturally, see as the meaning, purpose of my life, and it ends up dovetailing with this. So the meaning and purpose of my life, as I understand it at this point, is the restoration of the power of the sacred in our world. Right. So when I do a retreat or a thing or an online whatever called Living in the Sacred, I'm basically arming all of you with these advanced weapons and techniques to like increase the territory of the sacred within your heart, within your lives. And obviously, because it's sacred, only if you want, right? No fear, threat, or control. If you're okay with the default of 1% sacred, 99% profane, and you like that, carry on, no action needed, right? And so in a mythopoetic way, I've basically, my muse is feminine that I follow. I basically dedicated my life to this healing and recovery initiative movement in the world. But I'm just one person. We're just a small community. It's certainly not going to be enough, right? But it's like the expression and recognition of this thing that you bring up so painfully in your question. Just reading it puts me into grief and pain, right? To feel the acuteness of, because you wouldn't ask such a question if it weren't happening like right in your face in your life right now. And it's grievous. It's grievous. So anyway, that's not an answer to your question, but I did want to thank you for saying it and acknowledging it, at least at a high level. So with the Snow White story, right, the sort of tagline is of this episode, this session, is recovering the feminine. So doing what little we are able to and blissfully equipped to do, let me talk about how this happens in the archetype of Snow White. Okay. All right. So what is the archetype of Snow White? So there's a ton of, I could spend a week going into all the symbols. We could do a retreat just on Snow White. So what I'll do is I've covered a lot of this stuff in past sessions. And what I'll do is I will name check a bunch of the symbols. Gary will follow me as I go and start linking to the other 2-hour sessions I've done in the past, which go into, the sort of details and little rabbit holes of symbology. That's one of the beauties of doing things like this. And those of you who have been following our stuff for the past 2 years, you're going to remember a lot of these anyway. But at the beginning of the story, the queen, the inner feminine queen, is working on sewing. Right, so she's working on a part of her life journey, which in this case is embodiment. We've said in countless past sessions, the Taylor fairy tale of the two brothers, like Gary told probably a year ago now. Sewing and tailoring, dressmaking, is a symbol of embodiment. Clothing, tailoring, dressmaking are symbols of embodiment. So this inner feminine at the current moment is in this phase of increasing her embodiment. Right, and there were other phases of healing and bliss before this queen, and there will be phases after this. Right, so when Snow White becomes queen at the end, she will probably be sitting at the same window and be taking up something else, maybe to do with the liver or lungs, some other phase of growth to circumambulate and cover, rise the ladder of the 7 chakras. or the 7 stages of alchemy, whatever I mean, it's the 7 doors, literally, right? So as we discussed, like in our last month session, 7 is the number of perfection in a kind of progressive linear type completion. So in this cycle, inner feminine is working on embodiment, and it's confluent with the 7 dwarves. So this is like the highest level of embodiment. This is the final big boss stage of inner feminine working on her embodiment. Okay. And the way this triggers the story is she's working on embodiment. She loses vision, thinking about the complete red, white, red, black cycle of where she's going to be when she's in the form of Snow White at the end of the cycle. And so she takes her eye off the ball of the actual sewing, right? You're like intellectualizing instead of actually doing it. And it reminds you to get back to it because it pricks your finger, it pricks your body. Get back into your work of embodiment. Stop thinking about it and talking about it. Do it. And what happens when this trigger happens is 3 drops of blood fall. So in the cycle of 3, 1, 2, 3, and as the 3 drops of blood fall on the snow, she has this epiphanic vision, this insight download in sacred space of what is the fully embodied inner feminine, which is a feminine that encompasses red as blood, white as the snow, and black as the ebony window frame. Okay. And we've seen this red, white, black combination before. These are the 3 colors of the feminine life cycle. In the cultural traditions of Germanic, obviously this is a Germanic story, Teutonic, Norse tradition, Northern European story cycles, but also story traditions in Native American, First Nations American tradition, Australian Aboriginal, African, East African, and then also in the Hindu tradition, you have these 3 colors come up again and again that represent the overall life cycle for both masculine and feminine, but feminine specifically, the sequence of colors is red, white, black. We've covered this in the past, what the 3 colors mean. I won't burn time on this here. So basically, Snow White is this vision of the full truth, the full, because she has all 3. She has full blood, full red, full white, and full black. Okay. Lips as red as blood, skin as white as snow, hair as black as night. So she is this vision of the full truth. And that's why she's the fairest and most beautiful. In fairy tales, beauty and truth are interchangeable. It's not like physically, oh, she's so hot, put her on Instagram or anything like that. It's like beauty of your own inner feminine. The fairest inner feminine within you is also the most true. It's not physical beauty. You're still however you look on the outside. It's not about external beauty. So she has this vision, and then she births Snow White, and then she dies. So death is a transformation. She transforms into the Snow White. And then at that point, it bifurcates, right? There's 2 feminines at this point. There's Snow White and then the evil queen, the quote unquote evil queen. These are both aspects of the same inner feminine. In 7-Day Healing, the program that we always, the main healing program that we do, Snow White is the lost board member, the most fair, and the queen is the bully board member. They are both board members. They love you. They're trying to protect you, etc., etc. The evil queen is characterized as a part, that's this part of you within you is anger, rage, jealousy, a heart that is restless. All they care about is prestige, covering your ass, shielding from ridicule and humiliation.
Yeah.
Right? The evil wizard Sauron, Darth Vader, Voldemort are all characterized by this, where they have a restless heart full of anger. They're all about prestige and prominence and status. And they're filled with rage and resentment at the world that, frankly, birthed them and bestowed upon them all these gifts that they had, which is ironic. And they're filled with fear, threat, and control, the profane as opposed to the sacred. So Snow White, the lost board member, is literally lost in the woods, in exile with the 7 dwarves. So the queen deploys the huntsman, another aspect of the masculine, to do away with her. Snow White escapes because the masculine, how can he, right, even in his worst hour, has a soft spot in his heart for this most miraculous form of your inner truth. The dwarves, the prince, the huntsman, they're all smitten with her because she is the true feminine. Other little details. She's out in exile, but being in the forest is not enough. You have to be in the forest, drop there, forced there, and then willingly run even more deeply into the forest. To get to the heart of the seven dwarves region. So deep in the forest, this is the deep forest is a symbol of the unexplored regions of your inner self, which is where this deep final level transformation happens, right? Because what's happening in the cabin in the woods is literally the penultimate, the final is with the prince, but the penultimate integration of your inner masculine and your inner feminine. Snow White, the innocent true truth, and the seven dwarves. The dwarves are basically an avatar of your physical, they could be wolves, they could be swans, the physical part of your inner masculine. So it's this the cooking, the cleaning, the daily in and out, hello, hi honey, I'm home kind of rhythm is this inner work that's happening in the deep unexplored forest of your inner self. Between this truth that you have exiled and the inner masculine, whose job it is to boundary control, protect her, and to manifest her vision out into the world. These are the two functions of the inner masculine. Gary, anything to pick up on here, or?
Yeah, so what you said about the queen transforming, giving birth to Snow White and then the evil queen at almost at the same time, this is just fascinating for me, because this theme comes up in a lot of fairy tales, right? Hansel and Gretel and the Cinderella. There's always the real mother dying, and promptly the evil stepmother takes the place of the mother. And I've always wondered why that is, and what does that even mean? But it suddenly kind of makes sense when we see the action of this evil queen, the envy and the emphasis on prestige and all of that. It's like even as we are circumambulating to find our deepest truth, to find our core, we always have this companion of this bully with us, the bully voice, where even when you're on this journey, this good journey, let's say, I don't want to call it good, but you're finding your truth and everything. The bully is always like judging even that, right? Is this good enough? Is what you're doing? Will you then go on and find enlightenment eventually? Are you there yet? Are you doing this the right way? Are you meditating enough? Are you working on yourself enough? Are you putting in the work, as we call it, right? So there are all these things that the bully keeps bringing up, saying, whatever it is that you're doing, make sure you're the best at it. And whatever you do, it's not good enough. And we have this constantly coming with us, and it's funny that when you say in our session sometimes, like if you can't find your lost board member, if you don't know who your lost board member is, you just look to the bully. Right. And what they're saying, and kind of exactly where, because they're pointing to that board member all the time.
Yeah, whatever the bully is putting their boot on the neck of, the neck is Snow White. So it's
so that's amazing. That insight is just amazing, because here, when we specifically, what the evil queen is saying is, who is the fairest? Like that is the emphasis. And when it comes to fairness, it's Snow White. You can't get fairer than Snow White. Right, so it points to the lost board member.
Right, but that tells you all about the physics of this particular recovery of the feminine. The evil queen says, who is the fairest? In other words, who is the truest?
Yeah.
It's not the most beautiful, physically beautiful.
Yeah.
What is the vision of our life that is the truest? Is it me, which says it's all about outer prestige, what people think of me, what my social status is, how much money and comfort I can generate for me.
Yeah.
And the mirror, which is your power of reflection, literally. says that is not the highest vision. The highest vision is Snow White, which is a combination of the 3 cycles of the feminine. And what does that actually mean? Right? What is the highest vision? It tells you through the 3 trials, the lace, the comb, and the apple in the throat. Right? It's all right there. It's like laid out like an instruction manual, like an operating manual. And the queen says, instead of, okay, I'm going to be as fair as her, it's like this vision of prestige and reliance on the outer world will never catch up to the true vision, because she is 1,000 times fairer than this profane vision. So the only way you can, because you're like, well, if I lose prestige, if I'm fat and not skinny and hot, I'm going to be in pain. And the evil queen is trying to protect you from this profane pain. And she can't overtake Snow White. That's too good. So the only way she can do it is to suppress Snow White and kill her and transform her and get her out of the picture. So that you'll stop looking at her and just focus on me, and we'll be safe. We'll be safe. This is the classic, sort of trap of following the bully. You are safe, but even in this safe state, you could live to the ripe old age of 120 years old and still feel like you only lived half a life, because you never achieved your highest, most fair truth, which is the complete cycle of your full expression of your life in Snow White.
And it's also just fascinating how the dwarves come in and hold space for Snow White. It just feels so kind of naturally the thing to do for them. How delighted they are when they see her, and that's also kind of fascinated me about this story, because normally in fairy tales you see dwarves coming in, they're like magical creatures that come in and out, and they just come with a piece of guidance or with a nugget of gold, and then they disappear. But here they are here with Snow White all through the second half of the story, holding space for her in life and death.
And they're in full force. They come in a full complement of 7. Right. So when you see dwarves in fairy tales, they're a symbol of nature. So dwarves, elves, sprites, fairies are all sort of this force of nature within you, kind of instinctual as opposed to the intellectual. Witches mean something else, giants mean something else, but dwarves are in this class that covers the intuitive, physical, instinctual. Right. So the dwarves could be the 7 wolves or the 7 deer, 7 swans. Functionally, mythologically speaking, very similar. The details would matter, but she's going into the forest to integrate with the body. Right. And this was the mission. This was foreshadowed in the original vision of the queen when she's sewing. She's sewing at the beginning of the story. So it's basically like the title. It's like, this is going to be a story about embodiment. So she goes into the forest, integrates with the embodied inner masculine, which is these 7. Okay. And not just the beginning. She's going for the highest level. Presumably in past cycles of healing in our life, we've gone through the 6 other circumambulations. This is the 7th. This is the completion. Okay. So here she has all 7. She's fully protected. She has to serve in the realm of the masculine for a bit, right? But they all worship her, right? She's cooking and cleaning, but they worship her, right? They hold the boundary and protect her. And they teach her. They're like, okay, don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody. The clue, what the dwarves are teaching her is boundary control, which is one of the functions of the inner masculine, right? And then in the day, they go out and mine for gold and ore. Gold is a symbol of insight. So they're bringing back insight progressively with every trial. What the inner exiled masculine, the dwarves, does is they're in grief, they're in exile, they're out in the woods by yourself, you're mining for insights when you're out there. This is similar to what the soldier did in the Devil's Sooty Brother story when he came up after 7 years in the dungeon serving the devil, the dark man, right? He came up with 1 sack of gold and eventually 2 sacks of gold. This is the insight from your time in grief, exiled in the forest. Should I keep going? Okay, I'll keep going. So,
Mhm.
so basically, we're running out of time. So let's get into the 3 trials, right? So the 3 trials, the bully, the inner feminine queen, comes in, tricks her, and kills her. So killing, death is a form of transformation. So here she dies each time, but she transforms into the next level of Snow White. Okay. And the symbol of 3 is to complete this cycle, because there are 3 trials, of the 7th level of the cycle. Okay. So to complete level 7, you need to go a cycle of 3 and you complete level 7. And so what are the 3 trials in this journey of embodiment? So the first trial is literally a trial of embodiment. So we were showing in the beginning, the first trial is the dress, the bodice, the lace, where the embodiment directive, the dress, is too tight and cuts off your breath. So you're focusing on the body, but in the wrong way, right? You're focusing on your body in a way where you literally cannot breathe. So your breath is a symbol of the spirit. Lungs is a symbol of the spirit. The organ by which you bring in air is spirit, and you nourish yourself, you oxygenate yourself, and you expel sort of the waste, the sort of, leftover spirit, the spirit you don't need anymore. So her lungs are suppressed by the embodiment imposed by the bully prestige-oriented form of embodiment. What is the prestige version of embodiment? I mean, do I really have to say it, right? It's like, well, I focus on my body and I call it wellness, but really it's to make myself slimmer and hotter so that I'm sexier and I have more value in this profane patriarchal world in the glare of the male gaze. Right, so I do yoga, I do Pilates, it's sort of embodiment, your body is healthier. But the sort of low-key subtext reason is to still get to a certain number on the weight scale and looking hot for prestige. This is the directive of the evil queen. But it's evil, but it is protective. It's like, I'm trying to protect you from losing your husband, from losing your boyfriend, from losing prestige, which you do need some modicum of to survive, or so the fear argument goes. So embodiment in the service of the evil queen. So being embodied, taking care of yourself, but for prestige. It doesn't have to be weight. It could be, I'm embodying myself so that, I don't know, I'm doing juice cleanse, I'm doing all this good food, clean eating kind of thing, but I'm doing it in a way which also increases my prestige. And that's a sort of another form of misuse only at the extreme, right? Misuse of this power of embodiment. So embodiment in purely the service of the evil queen messes up your highest truth of Snow White. Okay. And even to me, that alone is already this mind-blowing insight. Okay. But that's only the first of the 3 trials. So even that, which is like, I'm still at that level. I don't know, I still have body issues. I want to look good. I want to, because I'm this like healing expert or whatever. And so there are things I need to get over as well. And yet that, according to the Snow White archetype, that's the frigging kitty level. That's the bunny slope of this entire mountain we're on. Okay. And most of us have this. And I'm just like, if that's the bunny slope, forget it. I'm out. I'm done, right? My inner feminine, sorry, Snow White, but maybe I'll come back in a few years and see if I can do it again, right? Yeah. So we are in it, right? If this is the archetype you're in with your advisee, it's like, I am in the cabin in the woods with the 7 doors. I'm like, shit, right? We are in the shit now, right? As soldiers would say. So this is the 7th level. We are finishing it here. We're going to go for the gold. We're going to finish at the top of the mountain, at the top of the 7. And in order to do that, dealing with body image is just the first level. Okay. And all of you listening, if you're all like, the blood's draining from your faces, you need to punch out, not listen to the session, and come back in a year or so. That's okay. We hold space for you. That's okay. I might want to punch out and come back in a year, but I'm talking, so I need to keep going. All right, so that's the first level. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the second level? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So the second level is the poison comb. What is the symbol of hair? Hair is a symbol of not just your embodiment, but your embodied wildness, your instinct, your intuition, right? Not just your body and how it looks and how it nourishes you, and my body's a temple, but this is the wildness. This is the orgy that comes pouring out of the temple of your body. That is not this Puritan, sort of pure, whatever, just fully intellectual and spiritual thing, but like that has fluids, that has desires, that has lusts, right? That are in line with whatever template you're in and also spill out of the template you're in. All of your physicality, your sensuality, your sexuality, right, is embodied and symbolized by your hair. For me, it's one of the reasons in this kind of low-key subconscious archetypal way that I keep my hair long, right? I don't let it down in public very often because there's this sort of energy that comes out that spills out of the archetype, right? But hair is a symbol of your wildness. And the poison here of the comb is the thing, is the part of you, it's also a board member, you use to straighten your hair, to order your hair, to align it, but also to get it under control. It's still long, but it's neat. It's polite, it's presentable. And so a poison comb is just like the poisoned lace, the too tight lace, is the same action of getting your hair under control, but performed and executed in a way which suppresses you, which stops you moving forward along with your true life vision, which is Snow White. It kills Snow White. Okay. So what would that look like in real life? So transliterated into real life, it might be something like, so the first is embodiment. My body's a temple working out, but really my low-key agenda is to look hot for the purposes of prestige and fear of loss of love, fear of loss of my partner, right? The next level then, the poison comb. Once you've gotten past the body image level, the next level is your instinct and wildness, where you say, I'm going to let my body do whatever it wants. I'm going to eat whatever I want to eat. I'm going to have whatever pleasures I want. I'm going to let my body follow my desire, follow my instinct and intuition. I'm at an extreme. I'm going to have sex with whoever I want. I mean, just whatever, right? That's the basic. And you express this with the idea of letting my instinct lead. But if you do it in an unbalanced way, right, you end up being, a sex addict or whatever, because soothing then takes over. Your wounds take over, and you end up following the wildness of your hair, your instinct, all of it, but in a way poisoned, right? Again, by the bully, which is your inner prestige, fear, anger, envy. In the context of like need, want, desire, which we talked about in Athens and in the online retreat, but also in other LSSs. Gary, you're still going to put links up for all of these, right?
Yeah.
Checking. Okay. It's the poison of the bully, not through prestige, but through fear. So it's need, want, desire. This is following the instinct, not for desire for no good reason, but for want. Right? Where I need more sex or whatever as a soothing thing for my wound, not for no good reason. Okay. And then there's level 3. Level 3 is even more subtle. This is the poisoned apple. Now, we've said countless times before in this series, even LSS is live sacred space. This session is a live sacred space. An apple is a symbol of wisdom. The Garden of Eden, the forbidden wisdom from the god Yahweh, right? The apples of Hesperides in the Greek tradition. That story we did with Loki and the golden apples in the Norse tradition. And so the apple across all of these is a symbol of wisdom. Here you have an apple that is not golden, but that is poisoned. And poisoned in a very specific way. That is half red and half white. Red, white, black. Okay. So the half white part is the girlhood, innocence, chaste. The half red part, red is a symbol of full womanhood in the feminine life cycle, the blood of menses, the blood of childbirth, where the white blossoms into the fullness of full womanhood. And so the queen eats the white part. The white part is the snow white part. The snow white part in this archetype is not poisonous, because the snow white part is the girl. The queen part, the red part, is the part that's poisoned, the evil queen. So this is the part that's given to Snow White. So the apple is a symbol of poisoned wisdom. In this context, the poisoned wisdom of the inner feminine. The poisoned wisdom of the queen, where she appreciates beauty, i.e. truth, but only in the service of soothing, numbing, fear, threat, and control, and prestige. Right? These things, when we talk about need, want, and desire, these are all the realm of want and fear, not of desire and love. Okay. So in the feminine life cycle, this is your own inner feminine. So I have a feminine life cycle within me, even though my external political social gender I declare as, cis hetero male, right? But I like to think I have a very powerful, lovely inner feminine within me. So as a part of your own feminine life cycle, what happens when you partake of the poisoned wisdom of the queen? You die, right? You die. And this time, it's very hard to dislodge, right? The dwarves, this powerful masculine, the most powerful masculine you've experienced up to this point in the archetype in your life. The dwarves can't even find it. It's not a comb. It's not external. It's internal, and they can't see inside your throat. Or with a bodice, you just cut the laces. With the comb, you just pull it out. Here, it's not obvious from the outside what the hell is going on. They're searching her whole body. They can't find the thing. It must be something internal. It's like what I say to my kids all the time when they were growing up. I need you to tell me what you're thinking, how you're feeling, as you're comfortable. It's my job to make you feel comfortable, to tell me all of these things so that I can help train you from within. Right? Because ultimately, as your dad, I can protect you from any external thing in this world or die trying. Right? The only thing I cannot protect you from categorically is from yourself. Right? And when you're 5 years old, the quality of your self-esteem, the quality of the confidence I instill in you as your dad, and there's a quality that you get from your mom, right? It's like, I have a responsibility to make you feel loved without condition, all of it, all the things we talk about. And that's my job. And, when they were like young, I would just tell them, this is my job, as I see it. Tell me if you think differently. And they're very opinionated about this, but this is my job. So help me do my job. This is what I'm trying to do. Help me do it. Tell me what you're thinking as you feel comfortable. And they do. So the trick here is that when you partake of the poisoned women of the feminine, poisoned wisdom of the feminine is the seat of your own internal vision. So it's poisoned vision. Yeah. Right? It's you telling yourself the wrong thing of what your vision and purpose is in life. And when you follow the wrong vision, as told by your own fearful, profane self, the evil queen, the specific thing this does to stop you is it lodges in your throat, stops your breath, and stops your voice. So it poisons your words. What does this mean? What does it mean to have this red, poison, feminine in your throat? As we've said in the 7 chakras LSS talk, chakra 5, Vishuddha, is the seat of the power of your voice in your throat. And so when you have issues with this affects your ability to speak your truth. Not just to the outside, oh, I'm a woman in the patriarchy, nobody listens to me. That's definitely the case, right? But also as a man, right? Where your own true vision speaks to you and you do not have ears to hear. Okay, so it's not just in the outer world, but this is your ability it poisons your ability to speak your truth within you to your own inner self. Said another way, you lie to yourself. you lied to yourself. So if you have issues with chakra 5, often the deepest, most poisonous, most sinister issue is not that you're lying to other people or suppressing the truth in the outer world. The most poisonous form of this at the Vishuddha chakra level is that you have failed to even speak your truth to your own inner self. You lied to yourself about what the true vision of your life is. You lied to yourself about what you truly desire. And when I work with, I mean, men and women, but with women especially, when I get to this point, there's just so much to say here in terms of how the patriarchy has programmed us, men and women, but especially women, where the chief enforcer of the patriarchy is often other women, right, to keep you in line. The men don't even have to lift a finger. It's like the women are the prison wardens themselves of the prison, right? It's like it's a very deep level of poison, right? Other women, other moms who keep you in line, or your mother, right? The person that gives you that look of disapproval, that says, good girls don't do that. That's not your dad, that's your mom, typically, right? And that's by design, right? That's by poison design. The one you trust the most is the one that teaches you to poison your own voice within. I'm not blaming your mom. I'm just like, this is how the patriarchy has designed it, okay? And that's why when you ask the question of like, in this moment when women are being so mistreated, I'm just like, it's not in this moment. And it's like, there is no silver bullet. It's like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life dealing with and addressing this, and it's not going to be anywhere near enough, right? But it's like, what else am I going to do? What else are we going to do? Just keep going, right? Mm-hmm. So to poison your own voice within your own self, and this is not visible from the outside, right? If you're my daughter and I'm your dad, I cannot see what's going on, right? Which is why when you're young, I try to like hit it hard and early. It's like, just tell me. I don't care what you tell me. You will not be in trouble, right? Because I just have to know so that I can advise and throw in my 2 cents, right? So the apple, even the dwarves can't get it right, right? And it's by grace, by accident, that the thing finally gets dislodged when the masculine dwarves transform into the masculine prince. And then so it's like a movement from boy to man. And then the prince goes from man to king once he integrates with the true feminine, Snow White. And it's a beautiful thing because the prince coming in hot from the profane. How much do you want for the coffin? And they're like, there is no price. And he was like, because he's the true king, he gets it. And he's like, well, then give it to me for free because this is my life. I will dedicate everything to this. And they're like, all right, now you're talking. Now you're talking. And in fact, let us help you carry the coffin.
Yeah.
Right? When you're aligned with your bliss, it's not just tolerance, it's like full force support. Right? Things seem like they're happening on their own when it's all these different 7 dwarfs parts of you like enabling everything.
Imagine offering dwarves money. Like they're in the mountain mining gold every day.
They are the source of all the money, right? They're like, what are you talking about, boy?
Yeah.
And again, boy to man, and then man to king. The prince does not become a king until he recovers the feminine of Snow White in the kingdom. So this applies to every human, not just male, female, any gender that you are. All of us have inner masculine, inner feminine. We just call it that because in stories it shows up as a prince and princess. But it's not gendered. It's basically names for these life forces. So anyway, there are 3 major transformations of the inner feminine that happen in this deep, dark forest. Okay. In the process, the alchemical process of integration with the perfect masculine, which is the 7 dwarves, is perfection toward the embodied masculine of the 7 dwarves. In other words, Snow White integrates with the 7 dwarves. The 7 dwarves are perfect because they're 7. And she then goes through trials that allow her to become 7 on her side as well. In other fairy stories, I think we've told these where it's like the 7 swans and the 7 brides for the 7 brothers, who it's 7 and 7. It's the same thing. On the Snow White side, you don't have the 7. She goes to the prince and becomes the next queen. but that's just, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
So these are the three transformations that happen at the highest level, right? The first is body image, which is so huge in our lives, and that's just the bunny slope novice level. And then it's coming to terms with your wildness, right? So let's say you're a woman, right? And you're like, I want to get in touch with my desire. The patriarchy has hijacked my desire. Like my body actually feels desire for men that the patriarchy tells me to desire, when there's a part of me that likes a different kind of man. And I want to get in touch with all of that, right? So you're going to get in touch with your desire, fine, but that's not even the end of it, right? It needs to be aligned and in balance with everything else in your life without being stuffed down and without going out of control, right? As you come to terms with it internally. And then even after you get past that, the final big boss of this seventh level is the transforming and healing of how you speak to yourself, how you, according to the story, start off lying to yourself. Right? At the wisdom level, when it's laid out like this in the story, you realize I am lying to myself. Right? It's not me as the guru saying, haha, you're lying to yourself. Tell me all your secrets. It's like, oh, I don't want to know, right? I don't want to know. But it's like when I tell the story, you're like, holy crap, this is true. And the beauty of sacred space is that you're safe. I'm not like, trying to like sell you something at the end of this, right? So when you realize that there's even anything left in this profane world that still has this wisdom, like the Snow White thing, hidden in plain sight in this children's fairy tale, right? That has survived like the Christian Holocaust of the Middle Ages of all the witches and wisdom women in Europe, burning them, right? After the forest fire, we still have this wisdom nugget retained, and it still sprouts up at random cracks in the concrete, like with your advisee, who said, yeah, I'm in the woods with my 7 doors. And it brought us to all of this again. And even me, I'm like, I already did Snow White. And you're like, well, we're going to do it again. I was like, all right, we're going to do it again. And it brings us into this even deeper level of wisdom, right? It makes me very kind of I have this very tender feeling, an emotional feeling of gratitude and wonder that the seed, the spore of this profoundly deep wisdom has survived all of this attempt to stamp it out. Right. And that tells us in its seed pattern the nature of how we transform within us in order to get back in touch with our inner feminine, all the wisdom through all the poisons. And yet this healing elixir of the story explaining this and then giving us the solution has survived through the wildfires of like the last 2,000 or 3,000 years of like Judeo-Christian and even pre-Christian, Hellenic patriarchy, right? And is still intact in the profane modern world if we have eyes to see, hiding in plain sight, right? It just gives me this feeling of like, gosh, it's just this grace that this thing has survived all the way through. How does that even happen, right? I thought the patriarchy wiped out everything, right? And yet here we are. So it's this very powerful story for me. It's very beautiful. I mean, we can probably do just a whole, even like women's retreat on just this story. I mean, I wouldn't do that, right? I would be terrified of doing that. Gary can do it. Gary can do the women's retreat. But it would be very, very powerful, right? Regardless of gender, it speaks to all of us about how we recover and heal this connection with our inner feminine, which is the seed of our vision.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, when these symbols and these metaphors just come to us with these stories, so neatly tied up in their message, and you start seeing them everywhere, right? What these stories do, I think, for us is when we listen to them in our childhood, they give us this vocabulary of symbols, and then once we're familiar with them, we just internalize them, and then we start seeing them everywhere. It just gives us such a powerful language to understand these things. And for example, and this is why I'm so always excited to find obscure as well as new stories, is because when I see stories that I've never heard of have symbols that I've actually seen elsewhere in stories that I've loved as a child, it's like, what is the story telling me? And let's just dive into this. Like, for instance, the magic mirror that we see in this story. Like, everyone knows Snow White, the evil queen's magic mirror, right? And this story, Snow White just says she had a magic mirror. Like, it doesn't go into any of the details. It's just like she happens to have it, right? And we see this. We did a whole story, and I'll leave a link on the magic mirror. And that story came from, African tradition from Zimbabwe. And that magic mirror had such a role to play in the story. And we learned that it is the mirror, it is the tool of reflection, and it is also the channel through which you get guidance from your ancestors. I mean, there's a reason why the magic mirror doesn't lie. It always speaks the truth, right? It always speaks the truth. And then when I was reading the story, I was thinking, the queen has this magic mirror at her disposal. And the only thing she wants to know is if she is the most beautiful. Like you could ask so many things.
Right.
And that's what you ask, right? So then when at the end of the story, I'm like, now that Snow White is queen, and I'm pretty sure she has access to that magic mirror, what is she going to ask? Right? Like, it's just fascinating to me to make that connection.
I love that. I mean, the thing that just popped into my head is that she would ask, "Where's my mom?"
Yeah.
And the answer would be her own reflection, right? She is the queen now.
Yeah.
And it's funny because now at the end of this cycle, as per the archetype, Snow White has completed. And she is the queen now. And as we said at the beginning of the story, now we'll see what she does. Will she be sewing? Probably not, because she's finished the 7th level of embodiment. Will she be working on something around liver or lungs or something else? I don't know. It's fascinating because it's not the end of your life, right? You're still going to continue circumambulating, and the end of Snow White is not the end of your story.
Yeah, true. So do you have a reflection question or exercise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the exercise would be, we're running short on time, so it's the usual. Do this only if you want. It's just a suggestion. But the prompt here, when you have some time alone with some pen and paper, is to just ask yourself and write out the answer. Given the Snow White archetype, where are you in this journey right now in your life? So we know we have one advisee who is in the forest with the dwarves and perfectly happy. And we've said we hold space for her. She doesn't need to move forward or anything. She can just stay there. And without naming this advisee, obviously, I would say, my feeling about her is that she has this very, I would call it almost like an almost kind of rarefied level of wisdom. Okay. In other words, I think we would all of us do very well to someday be at this level. Okay. And even she is in, I mean, who knows what level of the trial she's in, right? But she's not with the prince. She's not on the coffin. She is in the woods with the dwarves, right? So the archetype tells you everything, right? She is currently in the forest with the dwarves. Does she need to complete the entire cycle in one lifetime? Obviously not, right? But it's telling how deep this pattern is, when in my mind, my personal biased, so subjective view, knowing how incredibly awesome she is, and even she is just in the forest with the dwarves, I'm like, well, where the hell am I then? Right? I don't even know. I'm probably not even born. I think the drops of blood have maybe just fallen in the snow for me, right? Or maybe we're right at once upon a time. So yeah, so that's the exercise. We're given this journey and the overall arc, which we've just thumbnailed out. Where are you in this journey, and how do you feel about it? How do you feel about where you are in this journey, and how does it inform you that you are in this archetype, right? And also, if you feel like you're in the Snow White archetype because you're listening to this right now, do you like this archetype? Is it the right archetype for you, or is it something else? Or is it something else? Okay. Anything to add, or?
Yeah, so there's a question that that came up just now, and I want to quickly reference to a previous session we've done.
Okay.
I think we'll answer that question because we're running short of time, and I don't think we have time to fully kind of go into this. But what about the reverse side, where Snow White is in the coffin? Is she an actor in having to transform the inner masculine from dwarf to prince, or is she just passive and waiting, and kind of what role does she play? And I just remembered that we did a session called the gestation of the inner feminine. And this was a Chinese story. This was a while ago, so I'll link it up. And that is a very similar situation. This feminine is dead and is in the coffin and is buried in the ground. And, the masculine kind of comes and rescues her, brings her out of the coffin. And that story, I think, touches on what the masculine goes through while the feminine is in the coffin. So that might kind of address that. I'm not entirely sure because I don't remember all the details, but something about this, Snow White being in the coffin, waiting for the prince to come, kind of reminded me that we did a Chinese story that was almost on the same lines. So I'll just link it up.
Yeah, there's one other aspect here too, where it's like, I do hear this sometimes with, especially like Grimm Brothers fairy tales, where for me also, it's more this energy of like, how come the feminine is so passive? How come it's always the knight in shining armor and everything? And I think that to me, it's a very patriarchal skew to, first of all, more highly value the white knight kind of action. And then you value it more, and then you load the masculine up with it, all the action heroes and everything, and you deprive the feminine of it. The feminine is just a damsel in the tower, right? So it's like a double thing, right? So it's like, so the classical one type of feminist question is to say, why isn't the damsel out there shooting and killing the dragons, right? But for me, it's actually another level of question, which is, why are we devaluing, regardless of masculine, feminine, why are we devaluing the power of not inaction, but the power of gestation? Right? Because I could say the feminine is in control of this entire Snow White archetype. This entire story starts with Snow White's mother, the queen. And it's like a sort of Vishnu kind of dream kind of thing, where it's like the feminine is the progenitor of this entire archetype. She pricks her finger. First of all, she has the desire to embody. Right? She is sitting there sewing. This is her desire, and she is literally manifesting it in the sewing action. And there are no seven dwarves. There is no white knight. There is no, without this queen mother at the helm, like an elephant mother guiding everybody forward. Right? So in many of these stories, it's like it's the knight running around and everyone's like, how come he gets all the attention? Whereas in the background, right, the mother is running everything. Yeah. And in a patriarchy, not only do we dismiss that and devalue that, we're like, that's not even valuable. And then the action is what's valuable, and we're going to assign all that to the masculine. So it's like just saying, give all the action to the feminine. I mean, we could do that, but it's like the control is already in the feminine. And it's more that for me personally, it's more like it's my own issue to devalue that that power by calling it non-action and passivity. When a woman is gestating her child for 9 months, it's only passive from this dumbass view of the patriarchy. Right? It's a very narrow and dumbass view to look at a woman who's pregnant and saying she's not doing anything. It's like that's like the core of all life on the planet. And you're going to sort of wave your hand, disembodied and intellectual, and say she's not doing anything. All she's doing is eating pickles and ice cream. And it's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? So, so yeah, that's my feeling of it. It's like, yeah, all the power to me is with the feminine. It's like this other thing that, in many of these classical, cultural, across many different cultural traditions, there's like the sun and the moon, right? And we say, oh, the sun is masculine, so powerful, never changes, it's eternal. And the moon is feminine, it's changeable, it doesn't have its own light, it only shines from the reflected light of the powerful solar masculine. Not all cultures. I mean, in some cultures, soul is feminine, right? But for me, it's like, no. If the sun is masculine, the ultimate feminine is not the moon, right? If the sun is masculine, then the ultimate feminine is all of black space. That's the real feminine, against which the sun is like this little speck ember, right? It's like you're worried about it going out. You want to like keep it going. And so there's this latent power of the feminine. Everything starts as feminine. We all start as female, and then some of us bifurcate, in punishment for our sins into like masculine. And so, yeah, so that's my other feeling of it. Just random sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. All right, then.
All right, we're at time. Okay, we're at time. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and close Sacred Space. And what I'll do is I will link to the next session and put that in the chat on this and on Facebook. Okay. All right, and I'll go ahead and close Sacred Space. I'll close the session. Feel free to sign up for the next session, share with your friends only if you want. And I'll go ahead and close our Sacred Space now. I hereby close this session of our shared Sacred Space. Thank you for holding this space with me and with us, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, and the spiritual nourishment of the shared Sacred Space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, have a great month, and I will see you all in the next session. Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.